Good luck.
Good afternoon, Senate Institutions. It's Wednesday, April 10th. We're starting to talk about the Capitol bill a little bit more in depth. We're going to be working on some language today. We're going to be moving some dollars around, or at least start to talk about moving some dollars around. And we are going to try to work through this week and then the next week, and maybe by a week from this Friday, have this bill out. Time's getting short. Other than that, we're making good progress. So, we're going to, be working with our legislative counsel, Damian Leonard, when he, arrives on some language, but in the meantime, we, are just having an open discussion about, moving some dollars around. So committee, let's talk about what we have talked about. Let's start to bring it forward. We talked about restoring the A&R grants of $550,000. The House concurs with that. They took that money out and quickly decided that maybe they shouldn't have done that, and so they want to put that back in. We are talking about restoring Fish and Wildlife $244,000. Again, I didn't really hear any compelling reason from anyone why they took that out. I think it's going to impact a lot of summer programs for kids, I just didn't see a good reason why we would do that. And then we were talking about putting $30,000 for the LCI fishing tournament. That is a lot like what we just witnessed with the solar eclipse. That's 5,000 plus people coming to our state to enjoy what we have, and I'm thinking that if we could support that, maybe that $30,000 would turn into additional dollars to make sure that they could have a good tournament. And maybe some of those people would spend a little bit of money in the state. Maybe they would come and spend more of their resources later by becoming residents after seeing how great we are. So that's one of the reasons why I think that's important. So we're talking about restoring dollars. Does anybody else have all that we spoke about? Does anybody else know of any areas or want to identify any areas where they had a concern or a thought process or anything?
If there is bonded, and I just kept track of them. And I think these are rated in terms of importance. So we already talked about the water quality grants, the 550. On that list as well, and I owe two.
Yeah, and I forgot one. You had just told me.
It was $100,000 for dam safety and hydrology projects. I don't know how far up that list we can get, Mr. Chair, because.
Well, we can ask and we can put them on our list and we can sure we can get. I do remember talking about that. That we could be in favor about putting $100,000 back in that very severely underfunded program.
The next one up was the $250,000 for the refrigerant phase out.
Probably gonna have a hard time with that.
Yeah, I think so.
I think the 1 and 2 on that was the 550 that we had, and we've already identified that we wanted to restore it, and I think number 2 was the 100,000 for what you just mentioned, the dam safety hydrology projects.
And we're gonna go over the language, right?
Yeah, the Indian comes very global language, yes. I know that we have three pieces of language that we've talked about so far, and correct me if I'm wrong. We have the fish hatchery, we have the forensic lab, and then we had some language that we wanted to add because we're taking their $200,000 as far as the reentry, non-reentry. We wanted to talk about, put some language in on that. I kind of talked about that $200,000 and those available dollars across the hall, and they thought that we should probably use them dollars elsewhere.
Across the hall is Capricorn across the hall.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So they thought that maybe just keep those dollars out for that long, or probably spending $200,000 that we're gonna have to re-spend, and probably not use any of the information that we were to find out this time. But I don't have a problem with putting language in there. I know that was important to you guys.
Yeah.
So I think we just need to figure out where that, what we want to say as far as, the language on that.
So the intent is clear that we do think it's a worthy goal, but now is not the time to spend money.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
Al Cormier did say that they already understood and planned on
Yeah.
doing that. Yeah, but it wouldn't hurt to have it be able to go.
It's, not much into nudging, but it sounded like there could be a nudge there.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's identify. Okay, are we good with that for right now?
Yeah, I mean, at
Okay.
some point, I'd like to have Allison, once we decide on our changes.
Yep.
And run them past her in case we miss something, because it sounds like, you're talking to her, but she hasn't talked to all of us, so you gotta give her attention.
Well, we really haven't talked much. I haven't really talked much about her. We're probably gonna make those decisions pretty strongly before we get Allison, to be honest with you.
Okay, I just
Yeah.
wanna make sure that,
Yeah.
like, a check and balance.
Yeah,
on us, 'cause
we
she-
can't. You gotta remember, they're gonna get another shot at this bill.
Yeah.
So,
But still, like,
so,
Yeah, I thought we were gonna see somebody from the house.
we were, but we're not ready for that right now.
Okay.
And I wanna make it our bill.
Sure.
I wanna make it our bill with what we wanna do.
Okay.
And, they've had a chance to really do what they wanna do. They've made substantial changes on it.
Right.
And we have some things that we wanna do. And, and that involves making our changes because, they're gonna fight not to make any changes at all. So, and they're gonna have a chance to do that when we go to conference. So that's kind of why I wanna get to what we want first.
alright, it's just, I was hoping to understand the logic behind some of their changes, I guess.
Oh, and I think we've heard some of it as far as the testimony that we've had people in. I mean, we've heard from BGS about the Windsor facility. We've heard, I think we've had a very good conversation about the $200,000 for the not to spend the money now on the feasibility study. I think that we know fairly well that they made a mistake as far as to take the 550 because they want that back. And I think the only conversation that we haven't had that we're gonna make the change on is two changes. One is they didn't make the change, but the two discussions, the only two other changes that we hadn't heard of, but we heard from the commissioner to how it would affect on Fish and Wildlife was the $244,000 that they took out of Fish and Wildlife. What that was gonna do to them and not allow them to do those summer programs with the two conservation camps. So I mean, I think we pretty much have an idea of where it's at, and other than that, we're gonna concur mostly on all everything else. I mean, those aren't a lot of things, so, I don't wanna be swayed much as far as to. I'd like it to be our bill.
So I just wanna make sure we have somebody who has seen the whole landscape, whereas I appreciate that individual departments are talking about individual sections. But to talk to Alice, I think she has more of a big picture view, and I just wouldn't wanna not hear their philosophy when they approach this bill, as opposed to our philosophy. I think that would be helpful to me.
And I agree.
Yeah, well, let's get some language out there and let's get it in there, and then we can have it right after we do all that.
Thank you.
Here is the proposed Salisbury fish. Damien will be here by 2:30.
Well, here.
Thank you, Linda.
So, I need some of
Thank you.
Oh, the other language that we're working on, and we gotta find it in the bill last, Damien, is, I wanna talk about striking some language out of the bill and keep the naming of, state-owned buildings within the committee's jurisdiction and not the administration's. The administration is not at all interested in that. And it seemed like it was just something that was put in there to kind of kick the can down the road and not make hard decisions. So,
Is that our committee or?
that's our committee.
Oh, we have to think so?
Well, we at least have the process of the buildings as far as when we go, and I think because we do control, state-owned buildings, and I think that ought to be our decisions and others. The other thing that we need to do is, as far as put some language in. I have permission to talk about this now, is, we have, a request from the governor's office, not like directly, but just talking. They want to propose that we talk about naming the Williston, the new Williston, public service, public safety building after, Senator Dick Massa. So, that would mean a lot to him and that family, and, I will see the governor tomorrow and make sure that we're still on board with that. So, and once I get that okay, we'll get some language on that.
Jennifer Finch, for the record, I am the Commissioner of the Department of Buildings and General Services. That's absolutely true. And the hope last year, we have not had a ribbon cutting yet for the Wilson Police Barracks. It was our hope that Senator Muslim would be there. He's been a big advocate for DPS throughout his career. And unfortunately, due to health issues, we had to postpone, and we have not actually had that ribbon cutting. That was the plan at the time.
And he prefers that. He knows about it.
No, he doesn't,
I
well,
was just thinking he might like cold.
I don't know
or
if he,
something.
I don't know if he
Yes,
knows
it's-
anything.
all
Yeah,
right, all right, I don't know what he knows as far as right now, maybe I can find out a little bit more.
I do know we tried to schedule the ribbon cutting, we're on
Yeah.
the schedule, and unfortunately we had to postpone it. That I know for sure.
is there any big building happening in, South Hero or Colchester?
The police barracks that I think Shaftesbury is next, right? Correct,
I
next.
think if they're gonna do any of them, his preference, because we worked hard on that, even before this year, we worked hard on that building,
On the Williston?
yeah.
Okay.
He was a huge advocate for. the
Okay.
police.
The other thing that we need to revisit here is we need to revisit the language as far as on the Williston land sale as well, so we're gonna start writing some of this down.
There's a lot of language in the Capitol bill. I feel like there's more language this year than I've ever seen, so.
Laws of language. We have state-owned buildings, state-owned buildings. State-owned buildings. Language. We have, we have Williston sale language. We have.
I know they wanted to, honor former Governor Hoff doing something, but I don't know where that went.
Yeah, I don't know if that's something that we can get through here this year. I think there's way too many
Yeah.
competing things that are going on with that, and somebody needs to be a lot more clear with what they wanna do than what we've got, so.
There was a desire from some to name 133 after Pop. That has been a request for 2 to 3 years now, and I think that led to language in the capital bill about forming a committee in the executive branch to determine how state buildings to be named. But while process is great, I will just tell you, and this is what I've been testifying to the entire time, we're at an all-time high right now for demand, right? We're recovering from the flood, we've got ARPA money to get out the door. I mean, state government is just saturated in terms of the amount, I've never been this busy, and it's the same thing for all the people I work with. So we really don't have resources at this point in time to spend time this summer to get together, and figure out some long process with the AMC. We just don't have the capacity to do it. In addition to everything else we've got going on.
What we can do as far as if we're all part of this, if we're all back, if we're all whatever, or future committees, let's just do it the right way. If that's where it is, I mean, there hasn't even been even a formal request for that. I don't even know. The last time I knew, the family wasn't even aware that that's what they wanted to do, or they weren't aware or anything like that, so. But I do believe, well, almost there, I do believe that to keep that, power in this committee is what we ought to do. But Senator.
I just wonder if there's any economies of scale, if we're gonna put language here to name one building, why don't we just name both of those buildings and then be done with the.
Because we don't even know if that's what they want, if the Hop family wants to do it. That's why.
Okay,
So let's do the committee process, let the committee process play out when it plays out.
I thought.
A lot of time I knew there was people in the family that weren't even aware that that's what they wanted to do. And I hate to put words in anybody's mouth, but there was even people within the family that couldn't even agree on.
Okay.
So the last thing we wanna do is do something to the family that's, that there's an 100% agreement in the family.
And to the commissioner's point, I think we don't want to necessarily add work to their schedule, so I think it's something we can take up next year.
Mr. Davies, how are you?
Good, how are you, Mr. Chair?
Good, so we're getting a lot of language we're gonna be going over. I know that you're probably not ready for that today, but I just wanna get it to your attention as far as where we wanna get.
It's okay, I've got a working draft of this committee's amendment, so I'm happy to just start marking it up and.
Okay, so we're gonna have language for the hatchery. We're gonna have language for the forensics, which I think you've been working on for the forensic building, which we'll have to have some, just some understanding of what's going on there. It's all brand new to the committee and not everybody's pretty much aware of that, so we'll have to get in whoever's involved with that. We're gonna have, a proposal from the governor to name, which I can get it a little bit more official, to name the new, public safety buildings in Williston after Senator Mazza. We have, language in there, that we might want to modify and change that puts, the naming of buildings outside of this committee into the governor's office, which they're really not in favor of. And, we haven't talked a whole bunch about it, but I would say that I'm not in favor of that, but this committee will talk more about it. And, then we have language, on the sale of the old, Williston, public service building, public safety building, that we'll want to revisit as well. So that is, Commissioner, can you think of any more language that would be a heartburn?
There's lots of language, that's what I'm saying, I think.
Right. We're gonna have to grab the bill and
Through it and.
we're gonna have to grab the bill and go down through.
I'm happy to go through and just ask, what are the changes on each section and start marking it up, and then I can start working on the changes. And my understanding is you're aiming to vote next week.
Yeah, I think maybe by a week from this Friday, maybe. We
Okay,
can,
so hopefully a draft by early in the week, and then we can go through iterations as the week goes on. Whatever works for you.
well, it's gonna come fast and, so we're what do you wanna do now? You're in here to do some language on a fish hatchery, is that what you
I
are here
can do
for?
the side by side on the fish hatchery language, I can do whatever, honestly, I think this is my last meeting of the day, so you can use me however works best for you.
Okay, well, let's do some fish hatchery language,
Yeah.
everybody good with that?
Yeah.
All right. So the side by side. That I sent to you yesterday, should be posted. So it's dated yesterday, what I've done is I put the House language next to the Senate language from S312. And then I've updated the section numbers for the Senate language to reflect the changes I've already made in the bill. So the language is very close to what you passed in S312 right now. And I've made it sections 12, 12A and 12B for the moment. What I can do when you pass out a final version is if you'd like, I can make it 12, 13, 14, or I can leave it as 12, 12 and 12B so that you're comparing like to like with the House. But either way, so the main differences here, you have this first section on intent, the House doesn't have an intent section. Within your reports, the House is a one-year study. The Senate is an annual report on progress to address the capacity. There is a terminology difference. That could simplify the Senate language. The House used the terminology production capacity rather than stocking capacity, brood stock, egg production.
I'm gonna go with a more prescriptive language. as
The
far as-
Senate version?
The Senate version.
Okay, so I was gonna say you can,
The difference between the House and the Senate version, as far as the way that I'm reading it, and the way that I believe it, is that we have a plan to keep this in operation for 3 years, with them reporting back to us. But we're very prescriptive in what they need to do, which is to keep production, keep stocking levels at or above current levels. And I think the House version of it is more of a study. What we're already gonna find out in the the 3 successive years of reporting back to us. I feel that's where we're at. We're probably gonna be using that $100,000 elsewhere in the dollar amount because we have $550,000 in the big bill. So that really isn't and we don't even know at the end of the day, when, at the end of this 3 years, at the end of December 2027, if in fact the permits are gonna get renewed in any way, shape or form. And so I don't really, not in favor of spending any money to find that out. We'll find that out as it's the three successive years, as they move forward. And as what the intent or what how the legislation feels about keeping it open. Because every year there's gonna have to be money's appropriated to. I'm pretty sure there's gonna be more attempts to keep this open. More than what we're seeing right now. Our main goal was to keep this thing open through the 3 years, keep production at or above levels of where it is right now. And then at the end of 3 years, if something else happens, that's what happens. Yes, Senator Harrison.
Okay, thank you. So questions I have just about how we've structured this, the Senate part, is we have A&R doing the study, basically, and examining options. And I understand that the main issue there is the A&R permit, the water quality. But I'm just wondering if A&R has, well, first, if they have the capacity to do this. Second, does it make sense to make the reviewer, be also the entity that makes the suggestion on how to change it? There might be a conflict there, and then they might need other folks. I mean, they might need engineers or other people to help them to do this kind of analysis.
so, with respect to the study. And you'd want to hear from Commissioner Herrick on this, the House had it coming through, Fish and Wildlife.
Right.
So you could say Fish and Wildlife. I think we went with Secretary of Natural Resources just because they're.
They're the boss of Fish and Wildlife.
Exactly.
Okay,
So even though you have DEC and Fish and Wildlife here, Fish and Wildlife is getting a permit that I believe DEC is the entity that oversees it.
oh, geez, okay,
So they're both within ANR, but they're different branches within ANR. So you could say Fish and Wildlife does the study. The if you're with the Secretary of Natural Resources, I mean, this is probably a question for the secretary. Does it make sense to have the secretary combine it, basically saying, what do we need to do with the DEC folks? And saying the Fish and Wildlife, what's the feasibility? And then coming back and saying, this is where we're at. You know, we've determined that it's gonna be, you know, the budget ask that we would have for the work we need to do. In order to get that permit renewed would be X, and we think. But the budget ask we would have to. Purchase eggs and update brood stock and facilities at, you know, 2 other fisheries would be Y. And we think that makes more fiscal sense.
I think
You know,
it will with
then they
A&R,
come back.
because A&R is the big boss.
Yeah,
And they can parcel out any of the study that they want. They can say to Fish and Wildlife, we need you to do this. But they also have a bigger budget. I mean, they control, I mean, you have, if you just put it to Fish and Wildlife, they may not have the money to do a study, where A&R has the money. I
Right.
mean, Fish and Wildlife would have to go back to A&R and say, we don't have the money for it. So if we leave it with an A&R to make those decisions, then A&R can say, okay, well, this is what you're gonna do, this is what you're gonna do, and this is where the money's at.
okay, that makes sense, so have we, heard from ANR that they're,
Yeah,
Ready to do
yeah,
this?
when we came in and they testified on the bill, we
okay,
passed it on the bill,
okay,
yeah, they were in favor of it.
great.
okay. So the only other difference between you and the House, and not to minimize the differences, because. And reading through it, you can see the differences. Is the appropriation here is sitting in 12B. The House doesn't have it in the capital bill, it's in the big bill that came over from the House. So and that really comes down to how do you want to do it here? The appropriation, as it's written right now, which is based on S312, is coming out of the general fund. So the cash funds that you use in the capital bill, that money also comes. So what the House did is they essentially took reductions in the cash fund and put them into the general fund. And then they included this money in the general fund.
Right.
And who knows where they were accounting for this money out of? I wasn't part of those discussions, but
I know this, come out of Suffolk County,
yeah,
which was $11.5 million that were sitting in there. And basically, we want to talk turkey is that they took a lot of that cash and said, because we're taking some of your cash, we're gonna leave that $550 to keep that Salisbury Fish Hatchery open. And that's basically how, you know, I'm assuming that's how that negotiation went. And, so my question to you is, if we put this language in the, if we put this language in our capital bill, how does that money go from general funds to our capital bill? Is that gonna be something that's,
so this goes from, the way it's written right now is it goes from the general fund to A&R for operating
Okay.
the fish hatchery.
okay,
So it doesn't make a stop in the cash fund, which has dedicated uses.
okay,
The problem with operating funds in terms of the normal money you're playing with in the capital bill is that the cash fund is dedicated to immediate costs related to capital projects. And then the bonding money is dedicated to capital projects, which are things that have at least 20-year life.
right.
Because that's what you're bonding against is.
So this would have, it would have to be tax funds anyway, no matter what it would have to be, which is
Yeah.
what it is. And once we pass this bill, A&R has been tasked to, they have the monies in their budgets, on the big bill to do with what we've asked to do. in the
Right.
capital bill.
So my understanding is that once this bill passes out of here, it'll go across the hall to appropriations.
Yep.
Appropriations at that point could say, we've just rolled this into our numbers.
Yep.
We're gonna just delete this section because we don't wanna do the appropriation twice. Or they could say, leave it there because we wanna leave it on the, in the capital bill for reasons because it's related to an infrastructure. Basically keeping this operating while we figure out the infrastructure needs.
Okay.
But that's really a decision for you all and your colleagues in appropriations.
Right, so I'm basically what we're doing by adding this language is doing what appropriations had asked them to do.
Yeah.
For us to put it in the bill, and then whatever happens after that, that's right, I think their intent is to do with what we want them to do. I mean, what we've asked the bill to do.
Right,
So,
so, but yeah, the money's been there, so this money also came over in the House, so it's not like there's an argument over whether the operating fund should be there, it's gonna be a question of what bill they end up in when we get to the finish line in May, hopefully. So,
Make sense.
yes, it's just got a few weeks of the weather like we had yesterday.
Yeah.
So what you combined is basically the language of what we passed out of this committee, pretty much almost verbatim.
Almost verbatim, the very minor changes are really, just updating section numbers. And I may have tweaked a couple of words just to make it consistent, but it's essentially what you passed in S312, and that has replaced the House language.
Okay. Committee, we good with that?
Yeah, question on, that second page where it says. Right at the top, section 6, please. At the end, it says, the Salisbury Fish Hatchery shall not close without prior approval of the General Assembly, which shall be provided if. We can't make a future General Assembly close something, can we? But can they
It's an intent
consider
section.
it, right?
It's an intent section.
Oh, okay, so it's
So-
allowed, you could say that,
Yeah, it's the
They have to
intent of the
close?
General Assembly that
okay,
it shall not close without the prior approval of the General Assembly, which our intent is it shall be provided if the hatchery is unable to, et cetera. So, yeah, that,
can't say considers it, huh?
um,
And don't they have free will as people voting? We're telling, I'm just new to this. You can tell the next General Assembly you have to close it if.
What's the climate action plan change to plan to,
yeah,
it binds future legislation.
It's a study.
Yeah, no, I'm not, no, I'm talking about the general, I'm talking about the climate action plan.
Oh, that.
That says that, right, that binds future legislation,
Alright.
so,
yeah, all we're saying here is it is the intent of the General Assembly that it will approve the closure of the hatchery under those conditions.
Okay, here.
That said, it's an intent statement, it is non-binding. The other piece too is I would just point out that you have any number of provisions in statute that, for example, a property transfer tax. Those funds are dedicated in statute to be split up in a certain way, and every single year that I have been here, we notwithstand that provision. And we do it differently because the funding needs of the state, change, and that, like several other funds where it's a dedicated funding stream for something. Every year you're able to say, well, we're gonna fund the thing we've dedicated this for at like 50%. And we're gonna plug a budget hole with the rest of the money. Because the reality is we have budget holes every year. So you cannot bind the future General Assembly, so basically when you say that, just know that that's what this General Assembly is intending. But 2 or 4 years from now, when you get to that point, the next General Assembly could say, no. So
That's
in fact,
For me.
all of you could say, well, we thought that was a good idea at the time. But no, we're gonna do something different. So that's just the important thing to know, and anytime it's intent language, just know that is aspirational. So,
Appreciate that.
yeah. Okay. Do you wanna start working through the bill?
yeah, well,
Do you wanna start from section one on the money, or do you wanna start the policy?
Let's go on the policy.
Okay.
We're gonna still be working on the monies.
Sounds good. So policy,
Everybody got their bill?
You wanna look it up online?
all right,
It's
so
not on today. Is it 882?
Yeah, 882.
And I-
starts with section 11 in the policy. So
Section.
my page numbers are gonna be different from yours, because I have a working draft that I'm making edits in as they come in. But section 11 is where your policy starts. So it's gonna be,
It's on page 13 at this point.
So are all these numbers still correct?
those are gonna update, that's what you're working on with Scott, the spreadsheet. And once the spreadsheet for the Senate version is close to final, or at least, but whatever you've got by when I come in with the first draft next week, I'll get those numbers in. We'll update, and then we'll work through from that draft,
Great.
and keep updating from there. But Scott is tracking the numbers, and then
Already done.
when the time comes, Scott says, Damien, here are the numbers, put them in the bill. And I do what Scott says, just learned over the years. When Scott says do it. So section 11 is language that was in the governor's recommend. This is actually something where for years now, the language in the existing statute has not been what we're doing, and so this is deleting the obsolete language and adding new language to reflect the actual practices here. So DEC's facilities engineering section executes and consults on designs for Department of Forests and Parks and Rec. It provides professional engineering services for compliance with environmental permits, and is the custodian of all plans of record for work executed by the Department of Forest, Parks and Rec, regardless of the source and designer of record. So, are you okay with that language change? Are there any concerns? And if you have questions about this operation, I would say the administration is the source to answer the questions, probably.
What, just explain why they changed it?
It is archaic, so it's old language that no longer applies, and it doesn't match today's true operations. And so it was a request from A&R, but I obviously reached out to BGS to make sure that we were supportive, and we're very supportive.
Okay.
So, we like the language.
It is not unusual for this sort of thing to crop up in the statutes.
Yeah.
One of my first projects here was dealing with this for the Department of what's now Liquor and Lottery, it was liquor control back then. They had statutes in there that dated back to the 30s and reference things like buggies. Yes, I mean, penalties that have been updated since 1937. Requirements all over the place, but this crops up because it's an area where we don't discuss it in this building because it's not a highline issue, and then the folks on the ground who are doing the work develop a workaround to address their needs and don't realize that there's a statute that we put in here. So this is on par with a technical change, really.
Right, and there was some reason that I think Parks came in and spoke about this, and it made sense.
Well, more than anything, BGS as well.
Yeah, I think at one point, we were providing greater support to A&R than we do today. They've also built up their workforce that they didn't have back then than they do today. And regardless of the language change, if they wanted support from BGS, we would obviously give it to them. Every once in a while, they'll come in and ask us a design question, and they ask a construction question. So we do it naturally anyway, but this is old language that doesn't match current operations, so we're very supportive of the language.
Okay, we good? Yep.
And then section 12 we just discussed, so we
Yep.
skipped to section 13.
So you're gonna change section 12 to be
Yeah.
our version.
Yeah. The working draft has the new language in it already. And when I've made the changes you request, you'll see all of that in the new draft. So section 13, this is amending last year's bill, section 22. And what we're really doing is amending the 108 Cherry Street sale authorization to direct that about $6.25 million from the sale be deposited into the property management revolving fund to recover the deficit that was incurred from the original purchase of the property. And that just under $300,000 be deposited into the state energy revolving fund to repay outstanding debt for energy improvement loans or loans for energy improvement projects on the property. So my understanding from BGS's testimony is that this is a normal practice to recover those funds and balance our books. Yeah.
And
What
then
happens after?
we had, there's a little bit of funkiness. So at one point in time in the nineties, we did 3 property treasury buildings. That was Fulton Street in St. Albans, Asa Bloomer in Rutland, as well as 108 Cherry Street in Burlington. So what happened was we did a 20-year loan to the treasury, we paid them back, and now we're paying that debt out over 30 years. Okay, so it's a 50-year total payback period. The way that those loans get paid off, now it's an internal loan to the state, is that they pay it off every year with the tenant of the building. So when they pay their fee for space or they pay their lease rate, we add on a certain amount that then goes to the deficit in those funds. So over time, we're paying off that loan. In this case, since we have vacated 108, there is now no revenue source to pay off the debt on that building. So if we don't do anything, we just walked away and we said all that money was gonna go back to the bottom line, the capital bill. It means that you're leaving unfunded liability for the state of Vermont, right? Which makes it harder for us to borrow, we get a lower rating, all of those things. And so now that we don't have anyone in the building, we have no revenue source, so we're simply asking that the proceeds of the sale up to the amounts that you listed, which is the debt that remains, is used to pay off the debt on the building. Otherwise, they have no other way of paying off that debt at all. And it just sits there.
And when is the building gonna be sold?
So the building is actually, we are reviewing proposals now. Actually. So we put it on the market. We did direct solicitation as well as just sort of normally put it on the market. And we did receive some bids and now they're under consideration.
Good, and I assume they're all higher than the,
I cannot disclose that information.
well, I hope they're all higher.
I hope they're all higher
By
than
a lot.
Yeah.
No pressure.
Right, no pressure.
Good luck.
Thank you.
We're counting on.
We're working.
Well,
as hard
I
as
would
we can.
actually, I mean, we're joking, but presumably we wouldn't sell it for less than this, or then we'd have to write off the debt.
Here's what I want you to remember. You sell for $1, you gain 40 million.
He's not wrong, so the garage repairs are 30 million. The
Oh, you're
maintenance
talking
is another 10 million, plus we owe $6 million on the building. So,
Oh, that's why I want to keep,
Albert
that's
does.
why I keep a big
Yeah.
picture out there.
Yeah,
So,
but we are trying as hard as we can.
I'm sure you are.
we good?
Great.
And then something on this page, I just have and the Senate institutions. On line 19.
Yeah, just see. Oh, yes. Yeah, so thank you for making that note. And we'll make it in the draft because we discussed that on the walkthrough. So the House is saying that it's the intent of the General Assembly that the town of Williston would report to the House Committee on Corrections and Institutions. And we're saying, and the Senate Committee.
We got, yes, and the Senate committee first.
Maybe first.
Yep,
I
like that.
I picked that,
yeah.
however.
I'm happy to put you guys first in the order.
Absolutely.
You know what I.
You're
do
here,
is-
they're not.
What I do, is when it's a Senate bill, I put the Senate committees first in the list for reporting, and when it's a House bill, I put the House first.
That's a good.
I find it's always nice to smooth the feathers of whatever committee you're in front of.
This
So-
would be a fun one. Have you ever noticed in all the statutes, it always goes he and her secondarily?
Yeah, although now we're getting
Now we
rid
say
of genders
they.
altogether.
Oh, are you really?
We try not to say
We're
they,
not saying they.
we say the individual person,
That makes
commissioner.
sense. But are you
Director.
only doing it as you're touching and making statute changes?
Yeah, it's, they're
There's a lot.
literally over 10,000
Yeah.
instances.
Okay.
So. Yeah, I forget, we did a word search last year and the number of instances is astronomical. It would be like a 5,000 page bill.
Wow. Okay.
So we're getting them. I did most of Title 21 this year in the technical corrections bill. But I was only doing it in sections where there was something else that had to change. Because otherwise we would have been over 1,000 pages in that bill alone.
Interesting.
So we'll get there. Right, so Williston State Police Barracks, that property is not ready for sale yet. So this section requires or says it's the intent that the town will report in January 2025. The reason we're not requiring a report is because it's not actually clear whether the town's report is going to be, there isn't enough support for this in town. So we're dropping any interest in the building, or if it's going to be, here's our proposal, we'd like to buy the building, we are planning to do a bond vote. These are our plans for how we use the property, so it could be really across the board. The town manager was active in the house. I'm testifying on this. I don't know if the town manager's been in here, okay. So.
I'm sorry, what were you saying there's not a report?
So it says on the, yeah, the second line here, it says, it is the intent of the General Assembly that the town of Williston shall report. And part of the reason we left it as intent was just because it wasn't clear if that was going to be we're sorry, but after all of that, because the finances are so up in the air right now, for so many municipalities, including the town of Williston, that they left it as intent, so it didn't feel like a commitment.
Yeah.
What?
Oh, I
Because-
see.
What about this January 2025? That seems a long time for them to be able to come out there and tell you, how's that
So
impact your
I will
guys' plan?
say, like, maybe you state buildings, it's been around for a while on the house side. This one's that swirled a lot in this committee in terms of what balance was the committee going to strike, right? Were we going to, most times when we sell buildings, usually we sell it for the appraised value. We had a lot of discussion about appraised value, market value, obviously, Mr. Chairman, you know all about that.
Sorry, Melissa.
In this particular instance, the market's really driving the value of the building, and what that means is that likely we anticipate that if we were to put it on the market, that we would get bids well over what it's appraised at, and that is because it's the last, or one of the last, commercial developable areas right there in Williston, right? It also abuts up to an adjacent property owner who would really like to have like access, from the main road to their land. So my understanding for Eric Pembroke, who's our director of planning and property management, is he's received quite a few phone calls to say, when's it going on the market? When's it going on the market? When's it going on the market, right? Counter to that is like Waterbury, for instance, right, where the town came in, they said, we want to do affordable housing, right, which is one of the governor's priorities. And we don't have any plans for that land parcel, and we're gonna transfer what it's appraised at. The market is not driving that particular piece of land, right, to come in well over what we believe it is worth. And so it's different, like most of the time you just get what's appraised or slightly above. This is one where we think we're gonna get quite a bit more. So then the question comes down to, do you really wanna maximize the money in the capital bill by putting it on the market, getting top dollar? Or the policy question on the House side was, should we be good partners, good community members, in towns? And so should we just basically make or require Willis to pay the appraised value? So there was a lot of swirling going on that, and they had a really hard time making a decision, which is why, and to be fair, right, Williston did come in, but they weren't certain exactly on what they wanted to do with the property. So that also kind of played
They
out.
didn't know if they could even buy it, wanted to buy it, or had any interest in buying it.
So because there was so much kind of swirling and uncertainty, I think that's why, I don't want to speak for HCI, but I think that's why that language was crafted.
So my question is that by putting together into January of 2025, how does that impact the sale of that building or your plans to sell that building?
So right now, before this language came out, which I guess technically is not enacted, we have approval to sell that property and we can put it on the market anytime. And even though we're still in the building, because we don't have a storage solution yet for Marine Garage, because that was taken away from the Williston Fairs project because we ran out of money. In theory, I can still put it on the market and do a leaseback if I wanted to, right? If this language goes through, then at that point it rescinds my ability to sell the building until such time as this report or we report back to the committee and they come in and say, here's our plan, we can purchase it, we can't purchase it, this is what we want to use it for. And then a decision would then be made about my ability to sell it on the open market or whether it would be transferred to the town of Williston. So it does reduce flexibility. I will say honestly, it's probably gonna be a year or so before I can find a storage solution for the Marine Garage. All that being said, we're always looking on the market. So we could also find a storage solution that just pops up in lease space in order for us to get out of that building so that we can sell it and put it on the market.
So legal opinion, what is that statement binding us to do? Just so that we're very, very clear.
So it is, what it's basically saying is that this is prior to an authorization to sell the property. I was actually not aware that there is a pre-existing
There is pre-existing
authorization.
authorization. I can help you
So,
with the bill.
Yeah, that, I think knowing that there's a pre-existing authorization, I think you actually have a conflict and you need to resolve that if you
Right.
want to.
I-
If you want to pause that authorization. Because this was written with the understanding that the authorization hadn't been issued yet, but that this is one of the issues with someone coming in and pinch hit on the bill.
It's been modified a couple of times because there was a
So-
secondary amendment to the original language, and that was that we would consider it for a women's reentry facility. And then we would have to,
Okay,
before we could then sell, we would have to consider it for setting for a women's reentry facility. The lot is teeny tiny for what
Wow,
we need
well,
for
that's,
reentry.
so that was a couple years ago.
That was a couple of years ago. That's when Scott Campbell was on HCI. It's Scott
Okay.
Campbell.
So this is, so,
So there's actually two references. So I'll try
I
to.
don't wanna get ahead of the conversation, because we're probably gonna get there. I wanted just to remind the committee of the problems that we're gonna have moving forward with capital bill, on future capital bills. So these dollars, we're already, we're finding out, to be fair, that the cash portion of the capital bill has been a feeding frenzy for all practical purposes. My words, nobody else's. But it's like dropping, two goldfish in a piranha pen when you drop cash in there. So these dollars on these buildings, will come back to the capital bill and will, allow future people in this committee to do with what we do, to maintain buildings, to do all what the capital bill does. So the longer we put out their authorization to sell is gonna complicate that, especially if they get a great offer. I'm sympathetic to Williston in a bit, but I also think that if, again, my words, I also think that if, that the land's in their township, but if they're very, very serious that January 2025 binds us way too much. I'd like to get to, a language that says something like, I don't have a problem of giving them the authorization to match the highest offer, but I do think that it will impact what the higher offer will be. Cause it will impact that. If somebody is putting a bid out there, or maybe it might go up, I don't know, maybe they just wanna put it up so high so that Williston can't match that offer, but I think we gotta be very, very careful about tying the hands. When we don't even know if Williston doesn't even know if they can even buy the property, want the property, or have a need for the property. So that's kind of, I'm throwing things out there to start a conversation about what language would look like. Either from a committee or from council or from BGS.
Well, I'll jump in. I wouldn't have an issue if we held it until the end of the fiscal year, maybe till like July, which is 2.5 months. But the other thing I wonder about, and you're better to answer this, Mr. Chair, than anybody, the temperature of the market. Is it more likely in December to be worth way more than it is in April, or is it beginning to go down the other way? And I don't know the answer to that.
I'm gonna make just a stab at that, and I'm gonna say that property in Williston, Vermont's gonna be hot for a long time. So I would be fair with that. So, but, you know, with that being said, and you guys, you already, we know. And I think it's gonna be even worse next year as far as whoever's sitting in this committee is gonna find out that with the climate of what's going on in the state, with the overspending that's going on, that our ability to bond for more dollars is gonna be drastically reduced. And that might force the hand of the state to want to find a buyer for that property quicker, so that they can factor those dollars into a future capital bill.
Yeah.
So that's where I wanna be careful about. When we talk about binding the hands of future legislatures, we gotta be careful about binding their ability to spend money. So, or binding their ability to go out and to get top dollar for a building that they need those funds elsewhere.
So the administration would say, which I represent, just like when we cherry write, we do wanna be good community partners and we value the communities that we're in. But at the same time, we wanna get as much money for the bottom line of the capital bill.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So is this January 2025 date anything special to people, or would you consider something like?
Just for the start of the next capital budget process,
Because,
to get it in front of the committees then.
you know, when I heard July mentioned, that doesn't give them time to have a vote, say in November when they're already in polls, if they
And I
want to
just-
take a bond vote or something.
Take some-
Right. So I don't know, I mean, realistically, if they really wanted it, they put a bond vote on the November election, because that's what they're.
So what about January of 24?
So this is
Past
24.
that.
So yeah, so.
Yes, so this is next January.
Right, so is this coming January? Okay, I
So
was
that
thinking,
seems reasonable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like a reasonable.
Yeah.
thing. They have plenty of time to put a
yeah,
vote.
I apologize, in my brain, I was thinking 2
Okay.
years.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it's next January. I mean, you know, policy wise, I'm of course agnostic. Legally, what I would say is that if we are holding the authorization, I do want to make sure that those prior authorizations are amended. Because otherwise, I think there's an argument that this may or may not actually bind the hands of the department. And, you know, I have no reason to believe that they're not going to follow legislative intent, but I also do believe in making statute and law clear. So that you're not left in a, you know, well, wait, this says this and this says that, what am I supposed to do? And I think that makes sense, and I apologize when I drafted this, I wasn't aware that there was.
Well, and it's
prior
funny, because
authorization.
to be fair to Damien, I read the language and I just assumed that what it meant was that whatever was created prior to that date was rescinded with this language. So that's me not understanding how legal language works in a capital bill.
Well, so legally, there's an argument that after enacted language trumps prior language, but it's just that it's an argument, courts don't have to follow it. So that's one of the pieces here. If I don't specifically cross-reference back to the right acts and resolves and say, notwithstanding that, prior to, and that's really all you need to do, is just say, we're aware of this language. And we're saying before that authorization, you know, takes effect, or before the BGS can move forward with the sale, it's the intent of the General Assembly that they'll hear from this to consider changes to that authorization. But if your intent is to move forward with an authorization for a sale to the highest bidder, make that clear. Or if your intent is to consider allowing them to match. Make that clear, because they're, you know, that's one of the other pieces here, is if you wanna give the municipality an opportunity to match. You don't necessarily need a report back, you can let them figure out if they're gonna put up the bonds and the money to match. My understanding is the process is slow enough at the municipal level that they need that time, but I can't speak for them.
Right.
So I think that's why the House put this language in. Because they wanted to give more time for that, for the municipality to figure out what it could do and was willing to do before they move forward with this.
So I think that this. And I'm not gonna try to bind the commissioner back or into a corner either. But I think if we put language in there that they would have the right to match at the highest offer. We don't have to put a time in there. I think it's very highly unlikely that BGS is gonna sell that building before January 25th. Which we were, January of 2025. And that if we were to put a higher offer language in there, that we might be able to satisfy Williston. And that would get them time to, you know, get going on it, get going on this and saying, hey, you know, we don't know when they're gonna sell it, but they're gonna sell it at some point in time. So if we're serious about this and we're interested in matching the highest offer, maybe we ought to get going. I don't know how the committee feels about that.
Yeah, to the extent that they have an idea of the price before they have to have their bond to make a decision, I think that would be great, for them.
Well, they're not gonna have an idea of what the price is, because again, we don't know, but we know this. It's not gonna sell for any less than what, because BGS has it in it, and language, that they can't take less than what, the appraised value.
The appraised value, right.
So we know that they at least have to bond for that much.
Right, do they know what the appraised value is?
We provided that, I believe it was 2.1 million, I can look that back up, but that's my memory.
Okay, and,
So they know they have to at least bond for that.
yeah, so just a question about so is that public record, or was that just a nice thing that we did for them?
2.6, excuse me.
It's the appraised value. And that's as of a certain date.
And not to make the town of Williston go any faster, I'll just reference to last year's capital bill where you put extensive language in on the sale of 3 properties.
Yep.
And you had certain target dates that had to be met. And one of those target dates was that, and this was true for all of them. The select board had to take a formal action on it before October 15th. And then the town has to submit a written offer no later than June 1st. So I'm not saying you need to go any faster, and again, we need another storage solution, though one could pop up any time. But you did have gates and you were doing things in an earlier time frame. But you did take.
That was on this building?
That was, you did that for the Waterbury State Office
Okay,
Complex,
sure.
Universal, you did it for 108, and you did it for 110 State Street. And so you had gates and you had dates, I'm just letting you know that.
Right.
So we did have place, yeah. So committee,
Yeah. It would be good to have a consistent process with it. That one.
so. Well, we gotta keep talking, we gotta get there.
I think this language with the fix that Damien needs to do is okay for this situation because it's in process. And I'm glad that Williston has a number. So that'll,
Yeah, and as we say, market's really tough, right, because there's the appraised value and then there's what the market will bear, and you won't know what the market is gonna bear
Right.
until you put it out to bid.
Right.
And that's what's really, I mean, we know it's gonna, well, we feel confident it's gonna sell
Right.
for more just because of the
Yeah.
amount of calls that we've gotten. Right, but again, it's really what the market's gonna respond.
oh yeah, is there any value in updating the appraisal?
We just did it last summer. Which is, you know,
Last summer as in 23?
that, we did it. Hold on, I'll give you the exact date, it was fairly recently. See if I can find it for you.
So committee, so just going on, Senator Harrison's, what she's saying about the language. Senator Harrison's saying that she's fine with this date. As far as for Williston to move forward, right, Senator Harrison?
Yes, sir.
Is, and that's basically saying that they need to report back to both, body, or both, committees.
Yep.
By January of 2025. That they desire to purchase the property. And if so, the feasibility of the town purchasing the property, including any requested conditions of sale of the property. And potential future uses of the property envisioned by the town. I don't really care about that part, because I don't really care what the town wants to do with it. I don't think it's really their business to do that. I don't even care what they do with the building after, as long as they pay the price that somebody else was willing to pay for it. I don't care what they do after that, so I don't even know if that's any of our business. But, so. Damien, we're not even saying anything. All we're asking them to do is just be ready to purchase the building. Be ready to show us that they could purchase the building, or they have an interest in purchasing the building. And until, and we can't do anything to sell the building until January of 2025.
Right, so right now, and I did find the authorization language while you were chatting. So right now in 2021. We enacted language that said the Commissioner of DGS is authorized to sell the property known as the Williston Public Safety Barracks. Located at 2777 St. George Road. The proceeds from the sale shall be appropriated for future capital construction projects, so very simple, straightforward language. Right, with this language in here, we have to say, we actually have to say that prior to we need to take that language and tweak it, because what I see is this creates conflict. And that creates a lack of clarity. So if you don't want it to be sold, you can say the commissioner is authorized to sell the property on or after X date. So you can amend the old law just to say, set a date, like next July 1. Or July 1, 2025, or something like that, or you can.
Or after January 25.
Yep.
Or.
Yep, you could set a date certain that they can put it on the market. Or you could just go ahead and strike that authorization and put this in here and then redo the authorization next year. It's not complicated language.
Right.
But what I would say is, what you don't want to do is leave conflicting laws out there.
Oh, I get that.
Because it creates the argument, someone could say, well, you have authorization and this doesn't provoke it.
So obviously they have the time frame in there, so Williston agreed to this time frame. Or they would have put it in the bill, they had it in there.
Williston was okay with the time frame based on their public testimony. I can't speak for the town, but they indicated that this worked for them.
Okay.
Is my recollection of their testimony. I think their challenge was the town manager couldn't speak for the select board. Or for whether the voters would authorize a bond, because you need to have a vote to authorize the bond. And so they're gonna need to authorize, I mean, it sounds like minimum of just under $3 million, right?
So I just got it, so Kate was correct, it's 2.6 million and the appraisal was done in January 2023. So that's relatively
Yeah.
decent for appraisal.
But yeah, I mean, that's not an insignificant sum for a municipality. And you know, it's the question with all of these things is, you know, is what the town's proposing to do with it something the voters want to pay for, especially in a year where there's a lot of other budget pressure.
But no matter what we do, council. Is if we stick with this language here, we'll have to amend what's already been agreed to, about the sale.
Yes, That would be my recommendation legally is amend your prior language. If you decide to keep this, if you decide to do away with this, either delete this section altogether. Then you don't need to do anything. Unless you think that authorization needs a tweak.
But by doing away with this language, we asked Willis to have this language.
They can
Unless we
still
bring
bid.
it, right,
They can still bid. There's nothing that prevents them from bidding. The problem is if it goes on the market, say in June, they may not be ready to bid. I think the concern, and I don't want to speak for the House, but I think one of the concerns is that municipalities need time to get their ducks in a row. And because it's currently being used for storage by the state, their sense was, let's give the town a chance to get its ducks in a row. I mean, my recollection is members talking about well, if it was my district, I might like my municipality to have a chance. But I'm also, other members were saying, look, we've got budget pressures, we need to get the top dollar. And so that was as
That was the
the
swirling.
commissioner was saying, that was the swirling. You had two different sides saying this, and some people are in the middle saying, well, I I hear the town argument, I hear the money argument, but I don't want to make a decision until I know whether it's going to be beneficial to the state, what the town's proposing. Are they proposing a housing development? Then maybe that's something that's good. Are they proposing a soccer field? Maybe that's not the best use for that property.
I don't know, I guess I don't really care what they do with it if they buy it, so
Right,
Fisher,
So the administration's perspective is we wanna get top dollar on the property.
okay,
So we
Forget
won't know, we won't know the only way we would know what top dollar on that property is to put it on the market and see what the market bears.
so
So
my
that's.
question to you is. Is that likely to go on the market before January 2025?
It is not likely, Mr. Chairman, unless they find.
Could you be fine with that date?
I can be fine with that.
Okay, so we got that determined. So now. The language, so if we didn't change anything at all. Council, if we didn't change anything, yeah, I know we got to go back to the other one, if we didn't change anything at all as far as this language to concur with the House. Are we binding, I know we gotta change the other language as far as the sale, but are we binding them in any way, shape or form as far as selling this property? After January 2025?
there's nothing in here or in the prior authorization that binds the state to sell the property to the municipality. Or to sell it, or to provide a right of first refusal or something like that.
So it's pretty clean, really. It's just giving them time to get their ducks in a row to see if they can make an offer on the property.
Yeah, or at least come in and say, this is what we could do. We could do the appraised value, but no more, and maybe the state at that point is saying, we think we could get 4.5 million on the open market.
Okay.
And the legislature at that point can say, well, we think that extra 2 million is gonna be needed because our fiscal situation is X, or maybe they can say, no, we'll sell it to the town. So that, it doesn't bind anything, in fact, because it's intent language, Williston could say, we're walking away,
Right.
and then you can just move forward with the authorization at that point. So there's nothing here that ties your hands in the future. The only thing we need to tie hands on is whether this authorization is gonna stay active or not.
So we'd have to change the prior authorization.
Yep.
Commissioner says that she's fine with the date. And so we change that prior authorization. Commissioner, can we change that prior authorization?
May, sir, don't like when you guys take away flexibility, but yes, I think realistically, we're not gonna be out of that
And that's
space.
really where it is, because I know you well enough to tell me that it was so anyways,
So you get clarity.
so
I get clarity by rescinding authorization. I don't like that.
So
I'm totally
committee,
honest.
are we in agreement with that, all of that, what we just talked about? Everybody good with that?
Yes.
And
Okay,
Damien, there were 2 references, so Kate will follow up. There's a second one as
Here,
well.
here.
2017.
But, if you're
well,
gonna,
we'll call it a day.
okay,
We're gonna go, I will, yeah.
Okay,
But we'll
Appreciate
we'll
it.
send that to you.
I do have some comments on the next section.
Yeah, we'll,
so-
we'll wait, I don't want you to do it, so we're gonna, with that right there, we're gonna call it a day. And, Senator Harrison wants to talk, she's gonna go and we, she wants to, I want everybody's input on this language.
Yeah, and I
All
thought
of
we were
that.
gonna be done at 3, so I
Yeah.
scheduled a call at 3:30.
Okay.
So
So-
I apologize.
No problem, everybody good with that? Yep.
Yeah.
Alright,
Ours all day.
well, good work on all that,
Thank
lot of language and all that, so.
There's a
Okay, so
lot
from
more
this point
language to
forward,
go.
just to let everybody know, we're probably gonna have, and I'm not giving you, I'm not saying it then, because,
Yeah.
but we're gonna have some later days, okay? We might have some days, we might push to 5 o'clock, so everybody
Okay.
just kind of plan